And I'm going to share my screen. All right, so we're in Ecclesiastes chapter 7 this morning. So if you have one of the journal Bibles, I encourage you to open there, take notes, circle, draw pictures, highlight. And if you have just a regular Bible, do the same. I really encourage you to make use of your Bibles. I'll be out of town next Sunday, coming back from New Mexico. We have not been to New Mexico since 2014. So I'm going to touch base with my mom, stepdad, dad, stepmom, and one sister while we're there. And,
Safe travels.
What's that?
Safe travels, Chris.
Thank you very much. So fortunately for you, Scott Johnson will be teaching this class next Sunday, Ecclesiastes chapter 8. So I know that will be a great time to study together. And Julie Clark will be preaching next Sunday from the parable of the Good Samaritan. So it'll be a great Sunday together. We will miss being with you. So, I think that's all I want to say ahead of time. So Ecclesiastes chapter 7. There's a lot of text here, a lot of content. I don't know we'll get to it all, but we'll do our best here. So we'll just kind of take a few verses at a time. 1 through 4. A good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of birth. It is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting. For this is the end of all mankind, and the living will lay it to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by sadness of face the heart is made glad. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. All right, so let's just kind of pick away at this related themes here in these first few verses. There are some different ways to translate this idea here. The day of death is better than the day of birth. It could mean that the day of someone dying is better than the day of someone giving birth. So it could talk about giving birth to somebody, or your own birth, or your own death, or the death of someone else. The reason given is that this day of death, whether it's your own or someone else's, prompts reflection on the meaning of life. Or this first verse could be synonymous with verse 8, which we'll get to, where the preacher says the end of the thing is better than its beginning. The end, the day of death, the funeral, is better than the beginning of the thing, the day of its birth. Or the author could be saying here that the day you finish living out, because he says at the beginning, your name is, a good name is better than precious ointment. So this could mean that the day that you finish living out your name, you've kind of completed everything that is inherent in who you are, your name. You've fulfilled your purpose. That day is better than the day when you first get your name, and you haven't really lived out your purpose yet. So all of those things can be wrapped up in that. He continues to sort of press into this idea. It's better to go to the house of mourning, or we could translate that funeral. It's better to go to a funeral than to go to the house of feasting or to a banquet. For this is the end of all mankind, and the living will lay it to heart. That is, they will place it, literally the language here is they will place this truth, this idea in their heart. Similarly, sorrow is better than laughter, for by sadness of face, the heart is made glad. The language here is literally being stirred up, or grief is better than laughter. And the word laughter here may not simply be like having a pleasurable time. The word laughter here also means mocking or deriding someone, making fun of other people, which gives it a little different twist here. That grief is what's going wrong is better than making fun of people for what's gone wrong. By the sadness of face, the heart is put well, not necessarily made glad, but the heart is put well. The heart is placed in a good condition when the focus is on grief rather than laughter at the expense of others. And then he finishes up there, the heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. And so you notice how many times he talks about heart here in just this opening section. The living will lay it to heart, the face, by the sadness of the face, the heart is made glad, the heart of the wise, the heart of fools. The author is very interested in what's going on inside of us and in our experience, in our interior life here. Okay, so let's just stop there for a minute because this all seems very counterintuitive, doesn't it? No, okay. Enlighten us.
To me, it makes perfect sense because when you come to a death, I'm thinking myself, like, first of all, I'm acknowledging that where I am is not where I would like to be ultimately. I'm going from like a lower energy to I want to go to a higher energy before divine type state. So I acknowledge that, which is an accomplishment. And then it's all about that relinquishing, that letting go, that surrender to whatever that is. And if you're doing it in alignment with your true nature, with your heart, where God resides, then that process, which is difficult because we don't like to change, I think is a great victory. It's a great, it's a time to congratulate and celebrate yourself. And so once you start that journey, that's really the sort of the start of the journey. And so the birth is definitely the first step, maybe on the path. But I think the harder part is getting into the path and being willing to stand at the starting line and then take your first step.
So in the long journey of our existence, our eternal existence, then death becomes another milestone in that, and a very important one. And in your mind, better than that first step.
Yeah, and you need the death of something to create the life of something else. You know, you can't create that rebirth without the death of something else.
Okay, so even metaphorically,
yeah,
then the death of something may be better than the beginning of that same thing because there's gonna be a rebirth. There's gonna be the start of something new.
right.
Okay, very good. What else? What are your thoughts about this?
Well, if we just read this as a poem or something in modern day language, everybody would be sending the preacher to counseling because apparently he has some emotional issues. You know, everything is negative. He's very Nietzsche-esque in his philosophy, or not. Nietzsche is very much like the preacher. He's the preacher came first, but it's always that doom and gloom philosophy. You know, it's better to be dead than to be born.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, was this a bad time in Solomon's life? Or, I mean, considering the fact that he's famous for having tried everything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's, you know, he talks about, you know, he's tried being rich and he's tried being poor and he's tried, you know, food and wine and sex and everything possible under the sun. That's a phrase, a big phrase in Ecclesiastes. He's tried.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not even halfway, maybe halfway through, and he's already talking about dying.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe, you know, the focus should be on what you want or what you are doing, rather than chapter 6, what the future holds.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that, you know, I mean, when something is new, and you know, when a baby is born, everyone's excited.
Mm-hmm.
And when somebody dies, everybody's sad, and he's just saying, focus on what's bad. Because that will make you happy, it will make your heart happy. And it seems, and to your point, it seems a little counterintuitive. If I focus on all the miserable things in my life, my heart will be happy. Okay, well, could I do with a little less heart happiness?
Yeah, and wisdom seems to be his concern here, right? The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, the heart of the fools is in the house of mirth. So what creates wisdom, perspective in our lives seems to be one of the primary concerns here. Julie, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say this, when I think about times of grief or sorrow, they're more reflective for sure. And everything comes through the mundane, you're not worried about a lot of trivial matters, you're not in a state of anxiety at all. Trivial, it does bring meaning, closer to home to things, First and newness, there's a lot of potential there, for something good to happen going forward, but you're reflective. I think that's, talking about that's where, wisdom is.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe this is less about like seeking, like, going through the obituary and finding out, okay, which funeral can I attend today?
You choice and prove you haven't died.
Yeah, and instead, stewarding these experiences in life, that these jarring moments of grief and death have much to offer if we open ourselves up to them. But let's not necessarily find the funeral of the day.
Thank you. What I understand of this is, first, I think the heart, as he's talking, and forgive my ignorance if I am wrong about it, he talks about soul more. It's not the physical heart which pumps the blood, but I think it's our being, our
Yes.
soul. And also, as I understand, is that all the trials and tribulations through our lives prepare us better for the life after. That, as the cliche saying, if you want a rainbow, you have to put up with rain. Okay, so all this what we're gonna go, we will never know how good we have until it's taken away. Meaning, if we always were in the house of feasting, how would we know when we are hungry?
Yeah,
Or whatever it might be.
yeah.
So all those are important,
Mhm.
and maybe what he's saying, as I don't know your name, is that maybe it was a difficult time in his life. We all go through those valleys or whatever. So that's my understanding, but I think it's a beautiful reading.
Good, thank you. Chris?
I just want to go back to this idea of wisdom. Like I had a teacher, she was one of those teachers that wanted us to try everything, do everything. She used to say, innocence is nothing but the lack of experience. And I think when she talked about experience, it was more of like wisdom.
Yeah.
Do as much as you can to build that wisdom. Experience as much as you can to build that wisdom. Because that's just gonna take you through life.
Okay.
You're not gonna, innocence isn't gonna be what takes you through life. It's gonna be wisdom, it's gonna be experience, it's gonna be, getting out into the world and making it work.
Yeah, good. And
Sure. I just, this brings to mind something, I believe maybe it was Landon Saunders, we saw some films, and one of the main statements of it was, you don't want the trouble, but you wouldn't want to be who you were before the trouble came.
yeah.
So, and I can see a lot of that, some of the things that have been not, terrible things that happened in my life have made me stronger, have taught me things, have made me appreciate other things more.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. Let's jump on here. 5 through 8. It's better for a man to hear the rebuke of the wise than to hear the song of fools. For as the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of fools. This also is vanity. Surely oppression drives the wise into madness, and a bribe corrupts the heart. Better is the end of a thing than its beginning, and the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. Okay, so here, rebuke, it's better for a man to hear the rebuke, or admonition, could be another way of translating that, or painful word, which again seems counterintuitive. It's better to hear a painful word from somebody who's wise than to hear the song of a fool. Song here, it probably is referring to praise. Like we sing worship songs, they're songs of praise. So this would be a fool who's constantly singing your praise, right? Or this could be a reference to the singing and laughter that's going on, down the street in the house of mirth, where everybody thinks you need to be. So it's better, once again, carrying the same thing. It's better to have a little pain, in this case, the pain of a hard word from a wise person, than to be with all those fools who are laughing all the time and never have anything bad to say about you. Illustration, verse 6, for as the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of fools. This also is vanity. So crackling thorns here, the idea is that you've got a pot full of something you're trying to cook, right? So you need some good heavy wood under it to fuel the fire. But if all you've got are these little thorns, they crackle, they make a lot of noise. It might sound like the pot's going to cook, but in the end, it's not. Because those little pieces of the thorn bush, they just can't produce what's necessary for the pot. In the same way, someone singing your praise all the time may sound really great. I like it, but it's not going to produce the heat needed in our own lives at times. Let's stop there, because in a way he sort of switches gears in 7 and 8. What is your experience with this? A hard word versus good words, basically. You think this is true?
I learned from a wise man whose name shall be named. Always says, your opinion is yours, best. Because they tell you sometimes the truth may be exaggerated, but if you pay attention in that exaggeration, there is some biblical truth.
Yeah.
And so I would say that's a lesson is in line.
Yes.
Where the wise man, when he rebuke you, there is a lesson to learn. If learning is your primary goal, not your neediness to be right, because a lot of times, or need to be right outweigh or need to learn. So we don't hear, we don't listen, we don't hear what someone rebukes us with it, but if you hear there's something to learn.
Yeah, that's really thoughtful. So if our primary drive in life is to learn, to grow, to have greater self-awareness, then we need these hard words. If our primary drive is not, we're not going to be open to them when they do occur.
From my working time, I had an assistant. I had to train her on some new computer program, and I was not aware how I was treating her, because it was very easy for me to comprehend, and she was struggling, and I would go, "This is not so difficult. This is not so difficult." And my boss pulled me aside and he said, "When you say things like this, you apply it. She's not smart enough." And it was hard thing to swallow, because I never thought of myself of being demeaning to another human being, and yet his word wrote, "Oops, I better not do that." So I had to rephrase my approach and change. So the wise man approach.
Right.
It taught me, it was hard, but it was
Ultimately,
better
it's
for
helpful
me.
for you, yeah, and the other person you're working with. Yeah, very good. Thank you, Aaron.
I don't know where I first heard this, but there is no growth without pain. any kind of growth comes with pain. So if you're living a life of ease, you're learning nothing and you're growing not at all.
Yeah.
You know, physical growth comes with pain. We even have that phrase, growing pains. Any kind of growth comes with pain. You know, if everyone agrees on everything, half of us are no longer necessary. Because we don't need everybody. If there's no one to counter your opinion, you can't learn. There is no pain. What's amusing is what I'm learning now at the plant is they don't use the word criticism. They use the word counsel. If someone counsels you on a task, you know, pay attention. So they don't use negative words for anything. They don't, you know, they don't use criticism or condemnation. They say counsel. If you receive some counseling, and I'm thinking, well, that's what that means in scripture too. You know, the counsel of the wise.
Right.
It doesn't mean that they're just telling you everything. It's like, listen, you're doing this wrong. You ought to be doing it this way.
Yeah.
And that's how you attain wisdom.
Yeah, that's good. So that's a way of kind of reframing it in our own minds, perhaps making it easier for us to accept. Yeah, that's good. Good. Robert.
Sometimes, so I want to ask your comments. Sometimes someone else's perspective helps you make adjustments better.
Yeah, yeah, because we all have blind spots. We're all limited by our own experience and our own wisdom, and someone else may have a better perspective, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. 7 seems to be a little change in direction here. Surely oppression drives the wise into madness, and a bribe corrupts the heart. Better is the end of the thing than its beginning. Patient spirit is better than the proud in spirit. So some people suggest, some scholars suggest here that verse 7 begins a little section on suffering, the suffering of, for example, oppression. But the wisdom here is largely aimed at how we, what we do in times that are difficult, in essence. And so he acknowledges here at the front in verse 7 that suffering, i.e. oppression, can drive a person mad. I mean, nobody likes to suffer. Painful times are painful times, and they can lead you to madness or to do something unhealthy, like a bribe, to try to, you know, make it better. So with that in mind, in verse 8, better is the end of a thing than its beginning. Better is the end of a thing than its beginning. So that the end here, we could translate that as the outcome. Better is the outcome of a thing than its beginning. And so the end result of a time of suffering, as Aaron was saying, the end result of a time of suffering here may be better in the end than what we're experiencing when the suffering starts. All we're thinking of at the beginning is, this stinks. Why in the world does this happen? But the end of it, the end result of it, the outcome of it will be better. And therefore patience in spirit is called for here. This reminds me of some other who kind of speak to this idea more generally. Genesis chapter 50, verse 20, as for you, this is Joseph speaking to his family, especially his brothers. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So you have this whole painful story of Joseph and his brothers, and Joseph going through this oppression because of his brothers. But the end is better than the beginning. The end outcome of it is that God was able to take that evil and do something good with it. The end of the thing is better than its beginning. Or Paul's oft-quoted statement in Romans 8, and we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. You know, there's sort of that hopeful, optimistic perspective of history here, where there's a call to trust and believe in a God who is in some mysterious way working working all things together for good. The end of a thing is better than its beginning. Or Julian of Norwich here, 14th century, I think, known for this quote here, which came to her in a very difficult time of suffering. All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. All shall be well, all shall be well, all manner of things shall be well. This was a vision given to her, Jesus speaking these words to her in the midst of her own suffering and angst about the suffering of other people. So this idea that in the end, all shall be well, all shall be well, all manner of things shall be well. The end of the thing is better than its beginning. So this line here in verse 8 could be sort of a really inspiring call here to live optimistically, hopefully, which sounds a little different than what we've gotten to this point in this chapter, which seems sort of pessimistic. But here, this idea is that in the end, it's going to be okay. It's going to work out. In the end, it's going to be okay. Robert, you had anything to say?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you're mentioning Joseph and his brothers a little earlier, and I was thinking that maybe Joseph was able to forgive his brothers because he saw the greater scheme of it, that God had a plan to make it work it out for good.
Yes.
So I think that gave him the power to forgive his brothers.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. But it didn't come till the end of the story.
Yeah,
When he finally had that larger perspective.
yeah.
But I was gonna say, half of Joseph's problems were brought on by Joseph. I mean, his father makes him this great coat because he's so proud of him. And he keeps bragging to his brothers that even his mother and father will bow down. And I'm thinking, if I was, Gershom, not Gershom or one of the older brothers, and I'm like, you little punk, I just might be the one to throw you in that well. It's part of what we bring on is part of what happens to us can be our own cause.
Sure, no doubt.
The fact that he was sold into slavery and he realized something, and now he went from being a slave to being second only to Pharaoh. Because he realized when he was in that spot that, he got him back to being devoted to God.
Yeah.
Chris, I prayed for patience several years ago. Very dangerous prayer around me. Not to try trial after trial after trial. And it made instead of making my big trouble, it made it stronger. And so I sometimes think that this verse is a reminder that with patience comes stronger faith. So it's development for sure.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think this is this line verse 8 is the one to really hold on to, because I think it touches on a theme found throughout Scripture and can be really helpful, especially in the midst of difficult times. So the better is the end of it than its beginning. Okay, let's move on. We've got about 9 minutes left here. So verse 9, be not quick in your spirit to become angry, for anger lodges in the heart of fools. You're going to hear a lot of similarities here to places in Proverbs. Say not, why were the former days better than these? For it is not from wisdom that you ask this. Wisdom is good with an inheritance, an advantage to those who see the sun. For the protection of wisdom is like the protection of money, and the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom preserves the life of him who has it. Consider the work of God, who can make straight what he has made crooked. So another really helpful line here, say not, why were the former days better than these? don't stop pining away for the glory days, right? For it is not from wisdom that you ask this. Which is interesting, Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 6:34, warns us not to be overly concerned about tomorrow. Therefore, do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. And so here's the preacher saying, don't be overly concerned with yesterday, with the former days. In other words, all you have is today. So, let's put a little energy and effort into today and stop thinking about how great yesterday was or how terrible tomorrow is going to be, and just live today, because that's all you've got. Verse 12, the advantage, this word advantage means profits or again outcome. So the outcome of knowledge, the outcome of wisdom is that it preserves or renews. This word preserve can mean renew or revive the life of him who has it. So the advantage of trying to be a wise person, which keeps popping up here in this section, is that it revives us. It renews our sense of life in the world. And gosh, who couldn't use a little renewal and new life in our lives? But like verse 13 is sort of a caveat. So consider the work of God, who can make straight what he has made crooked. So we've seen this numerous times in Ecclesiastes. It's great to pursue wisdom. Wisdom is really good for us. It keeps us from pining away for the former days. But there's a limit to it. So if God makes something crooked, we're not going to be able to straighten it, and we may never even understand why it's crooked in the first place. So there are some things that we just have to, there's certain limitations we have to learn to live within, certain limitations we have to learn to accept. Warren Wiersbe in his book, Be Satisfied. If God makes something crooked, he is able to make it straight. And perhaps he will ask us to work with him to get the job done. But if he wants it to stay crooked, we'd better not argue with him. We don't fully understand all the works of God, but we do know that he's made everything beautiful in its time. This includes the things we may think are twisted and ugly. And I think there's a lot of different layers to this little line here, who can make straight what God has made crooked. We like things to be nice and straight and orderly and neat. And we should open ourselves up to the possibility that sometimes they're not, because God wants it that way. And we can learn to be okay with that, right?
There are no shortcuts.
But yeah, sometimes there's not a straight line, right? Where we are to where we want to be. Sometimes it's very crooked. And maybe God made that. I don't like that. I can accept it. 14, in the day of prosperity, be joyful, and in the day of adversity, consider God has made the one as well as the other, so that man may not find out anything that will be after him. In my vain life, I've seen everything. There's a righteous man who perishes in his righteousness. There's a wicked man who prolongs his life in evil doing. Be not overly righteous, and do not make yourself too wise. Why should you destroy yourself? Be not overly wicked. Neither be a fool. Why should you die before your time? It is good that you should take hold of this, and from that withhold not your hand. For the one who fears God shall come out from both of them. So note this, you heard this in church. Be not overly righteous, and be not overly wicked. What do you make of those two statements? What is she saying?
Don't carry anything to the extreme.
Okay. How could you carry righteousness to an extreme?
Well, just that simple fact. you can, you're so righteous that you're now able to teach everyone else what righteousness is.
Okay.
When you lord it over someone else, that, I mean, that's not Jesus's parable. The tax collector who's quietly beating his heart and praying because he's a sinner. And the Pharisee is going, thank you, God, for not making me like this horrible tax collector. And, that's being overly righteous. Being overly wicked, rather self-explanatory. Don't take advantage of the fact that you can't, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Good.
Sorry for too many cliches.
I don't know who's up first. Go ahead.
That we're capable of being both and not either or. It's not overly righteous or overly wicked. We're capable of being both. And we don't admit that to ourselves. And that's tough.
Yeah. And I wonder if that's a circle there. Being overly righteous ends up being the same as being overly wicked, right?
Further to say, overly righteous are more dangerous.
Uh,
Because the wicked person knows that he's wicked, the overly righteous person doesn't know that he has a justification for everyone that does. It's desensitized to other suffering.
yeah. That's good. That's very good. Thank you.
I think the operative word is actually two. You can put almost anything after that word. And that's the point. That's why there's such a polarity between the two words. When you're to anything, when you go towards that extreme, you start looking toward the external, toward the things of the world. I'm not saying that moderation is best. What I'm saying is it pulls you away from what's most important, which is your center and where God resides. So I really think two is the word that we need to focus on.
Nice. Yeah. Let me share this one story, and then we're going to have to quit here. Eugene Peterson, in his book Christ's Place in 10,000 Places, has got a really thought-provoking commentary on this idea here. But he tells the story of Procrustes. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. Greek figure. All right. So in this Greek fable, parable, story, you've got Procrustes, who is running a bed and breakfast, and seems to be a very hospitable guy, and seems to be a bit of the ideal look for the ideal Greek man. Okay. And he welcomes everybody into his bed and breakfast and treats them very well and tells them he's got this special bed upstairs in the room, and they're just going to love it because it takes the shape of whoever's sleeping in it. Well, that's wonderful. But in fact, it's a terrible thing because what it is a way for him to either shrink the person who's sleeping in it because they're too tall and they don't match his ideal, or lengthen them because they're too short and they don't match his ideal. And it's a very painful, as you can imagine, experience for each guest to be either cut down to size or to be lengthened to his size. And when they leave the bed and breakfast the next morning, they're really not doing too well. And so Eugene Peterson pulls this story out to say, this is what churches do who are overly righteous. They say, welcome, welcome, everybody is welcome here. And then they use everything within their power to make them look exactly like they are, like the church is. When instead, they should be trying to help them look more and more like Christ and the person that Jesus has made them to be. So sort of fascinating image there of what overly righteous might look like in the church. All right, so we're going to stop there. We're going to come back to Ecclesiastes chapter 8. Next Sunday, Scott will be teaching, so bring your hardest questions for him. All right, thanks. See you, John.
Bye.